All right, here we go. Welcome to the REWIRE podcast. I have a incredible guest here today. Her name is Dr. Jessie Haymayer. She is the physician founder of Well Empowered, where she practices heart-centered, data-driven functional medicine. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. H.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much,
it.
Brian. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your community.
Thank you. Something that I see in everything I've researched about you so far that really stands out for me. So I wanted to kind of start things off with that. And that is the statement of authoring your vision of vitality, honoring your health. And, I love the word authoring. And it really, for me, it implies that, giving people sort of the power to take their health into their own hands and almost really taking that responsibility on for themselves. I'm just wondering if you could sort of expand on that statement a little bit
Yeah,
to begin.
absolutely. Great question. So, what I mean by yes, authoring your vision of vitality is exactly what you're pointing to, Brian, that for any of us to fulfill our intention for our health and our life, first we have to know what our intention is. Right. And so, really,
Mhm.
when we author our vision of vitality, we are giving life to our intention for our health and our life. And I really feel, I really believe in my experience that this is already in people. They just haven't given words to it yet. So, when I work with people, it is one of the foundations for engaging is let's get clear on your intention for your health and your life. And really, for most people, their vision of vitality is both how they intend to feel moving about the world and also what that makes available for them. It's kind of like the what and the why. And to me, these are really crucial aspects to begin to author a whole new journey grounded in self love and also grounded in being well educated on your body and your health and your unique needs, right? There's a great quote by Yogi Berra that's something like, if you don't know where you're going, you'll probably get there, something like that, right? And to me, it's like, we need to be clear about where we're going and why we're getting there, why we want to go there. And then from there, we can start to gather the information needed so that we can begin a journey based on effective actions in reference to our intended future.
Yeah. Oh, no, I love that. And I think it makes so much sense. And a lot of people often will have goals. I want to lose X amount of pounds or I want to get here or there, but what does that feel like? So, what is the intention of how you want to show up? And I think it's such an important place to start. And a lot of people don't necessarily give that much shelf space in
Yeah.
beginning the
And
journey.
I would even argue, Brian, that, things like weight loss, which people all the time frequently talk about as a goal, I would argue that's not a goal. And I'm going to be a little like nitpicky, right? I would argue that's an outcome, right? That's an outcome. And so
Yeah.
if that's the intended outcome, we want to create goals of cultivating habits, actions, and inactions that allow for that outcome to be produced, right? It's kind of like if someone said a young kiddo said, I want to be a professional soccer player. Okay, that's the outcome. Now let's talk about all of the things that will be required, new habits, new actions, and inactions that you'll need to develop in order to produce that outcome. Similar thing.
Yeah. Yes. No, absolutely, but different. And yeah, that's an interesting way of describing that. The what and the why are important, very important as well. The why I feel when doing the work, when you're trying to shift somebody's mindset into what you're describing here as sort of taking that ownership and really saying what is it you want to feel like. Do you have a process to get to the why? Because starting with why is important for any transformation. And so, like, is there a process or a way of helping flush
Yes,
that
and
out
I'm
with
glad you
somebody?
asked. So, for the people in your audience who are listening right now, my encouragement is to actually do this exercise right now. right? Assuming you're not driving. But to do this exercise, you actually want to grab a piece of paper and a pen. You can do it electronically, but neuroscience tells us there's power in writing. So my encouragement is to actually write.
Mhm.
And to get to our why, where we want to start is with a little bit of time traveling. So my invitation is to time travel to the 5-year future and answer for yourself how old you will be in 5 years. For me, I'll be 52. And, time traveling to that 5-year future, my next invitation is tell me the story of what it is to be you in 5 years with your health and vitality as you intend and desire they occur, right? Tell that story in first person present tense, right? It would be something like, I'm 52 and I'm strong and, resilient and thriving, full of energy, whatever's there for you, right? You want to tell that 5-year story of yourself as if it's happening right now. And then when you've completed that exercise, you're going to do a different exercise. And this other exercise is also some time traveling, but in this 5-year future, you're actually going to tell the story of the downward spiral, like crummy downward spiral future where committed not be your truth. And I have to tell you, Brian, like that part, like, I personally don't love it, right? I resist it. I don't want to do it. But
Yeah.
I really have found over the course of, decades of working with people in elevating health and producing and sustaining outcomes that it is valuable for us to get present to both what I like to think of as the carrot dangling, our intended future, as well as the stick on the back, the future that we just cannot have. No, 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 no way, no how. They're both useful. Now, ultimately, where we really want to dwell is in that carrot dangling, but really seeing for ourselves, okay, what would it be like in the 5-year future? And either one of these scenarios is useful.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I love the contrast. It's interesting when I personally work with someone early on, we'll look at some of those pain points, and we can see where the pattern is. But I haven't really approached it like that, and I find that really interesting. I mean, in meditation, we're continually using different practices like visualization, 5 years forward, which is very important. But yeah, the contrast is interesting. I think that's an important picture to paint as well, because sometimes we don't see much past the
Yeah,
present moment.
definitely. And also really seeing, if I don't change, okay, what's the downward spiral future? Like, ooh, no, and again, ultimately,
Yeah,
that's not where we want to live, but being able to see it can be very useful.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that ties into something else that I found very interesting. I was listening to a few of your posts, and one of them in particular was, when we're in that present moment and we're not feeling good, we're not in the mood to do that workout. We're not in the mood to take whatever action we need to take that will get us to the better 5-year outcome. How do you approach that? Because in the mood is the challenge for everybody. Of course, the idea is, we need to create that habit and have some discipline to be able to overcome that feeling, to resist the late snack or whatever it might be that's getting in the way of our outcome. So, what's your approach around shifting the mood and taking better
So, to
action?
start with, when people get clear on their vision of vitality and their intention for their health and their life, right? And that involves, just like we were saying, those two exercises, but then there's also a third portion where people actually author a one, 2 to 3 sentence vision of vitality, right? And so when people author it and then begin a practice of staying connected to it, that fundamentally shifts the mood for people. So when people are coming from what's my intention, it's a very different conversation than do I want to do this or not? Or, oh, that's bad, but I want it. Or that, like those kind of conversations that are often derail people. So So starting by being connected, cultivating a ritual, being connected to your intention for your health in your life every day in the morning is one powerful way to shift the mood in this area of your life. Now, does it do it all? Absolutely not. So then the next step is in the moment, beginning a conversation with yourself called, what's the best game I'm willing to play right now? What's the best game I'm willing to play right now?
Mm.
And each of those words is really selected carefully, right? Because best game is not the same as a perfect game. And willing to play right now acknowledges there may be a better game that you're not willing to play right now, right? So it's not
Yeah.
okay, it's Friday night and the best game would be no alcohol. But the game I'm willing to play is to stop after 2. Okay, is that a better game? I'm gonna applaud. If that's a better game, that's what I'm voting for. So really it becomes a practice over time of better game, better game, better game. And there's synergy between that. Playing your better game over and over and over again as a practice over time. I mean, I know you've seen it in your work, Brian. It's just it produces outcomes that feel like magic.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. And yeah, and I practice that, in my own life as well. And it's amazing when you start to string some of those consistent wins together, you get the momentum that gives you that shift to overcome the temptation. To go back to your first point, you know, I I really find it important for people to protect a little time in the morning, a little space before they get on their phone, before they get pulled into all the different directions, to actually sit and sort of center with their intention, to kind of frame up the day, just one day at a time. That first step you described feels almost like that, like it's almost a meditative practice or something. Do you give somebody a specific practice, I guess, to put themselves into that right frame going into the day?
So I would say my directives to people are create and honor a ritual that leaves you connected and present to your intention for your health in your life, to your vision of vitality for your health in your life. And then sometimes people will ask me for input, but if they don't, I let them go, right? Because I do want them to author what that looks like for them. For some people, writing it down, like we mentioned earlier, writing's a powerful tool to enhance our uh, neurological changes that we're trying to make, create new connections in our brain, which
Yeah.
ultimately allow for new habits, new thoughts, and new habits. So for some people, it might be writing it down and reading it aloud. For some people, it might be reading it aloud to themselves in the mirror. Or for other people, it might be reading it, meditating, feeling it in their bones as they're meditating and reading it again. So I do give people suggestions, and what I've just shared are some of them. But I do encourage people to come up with their own unique way, the way that really feels right to them to connect to their vision of vitality, their intention for their health and their life.
Okay, so you're just more of saying, like, protect time
Protect
for
time.
that practice.
Yeah,
You
and
fill
do it
in.
in earnest, right? Because we can do things like, oh, grocery list. Yep, got
Mm,
that done, right? But actually, part of the instruction is connect and be present, right? You can't checklist that. That actually requires something.
yeah. And you use the word honor with your health a lot as well, which I really find interesting. And I feel that when you say it, I guess that might be difficult for some people who are new to your approach to grasp, especially if they've, the way you're creating a lifestyle that they can actually thrive and sustain for the rest of their lives. Um, so when it comes to the honoring piece, do you have a philosophy around how to truly honor your health, or to really sort of connect, you know, from the heart to that, incredible gift of being healthy, and just really sort of connecting deeper
Yeah.
to that.
Well, so to me, the word honor lives in our actions, right? If someone says, "Oh yes, I honor my health as sacred. And, they're going out and, drinking 3 bottles of wine a couple of nights and, never see a vegetable on their plate and they don't work out. That I would say their actions don't point to that being true, right? To me, that is not evidence. It's not being substantiated by their actions. But of course, living a journey in our health means that uh, for a lot of people, right, they're very far from what they envision as their fullest expression of honoring their health as sacred, right? They for a million different reasons. Maybe it wasn't prioritized in their household. Maybe they just have been, focusing on their career and their family and have had a health scare and are all of a sudden awakened to the sacred gift of life, right? For a lot of reasons, people may not have yet prioritized their health. And so to me, it really is a lived journey and one of actions that are elevated over time. So honoring what it means to you to honor your health as sacred, I'm sure, Brian, is different than how you would define that 10 years ago, right? Because you're someone who's devoted to your health. And so as you learn more and evolve more, there's more that you see. That's just part of the journey. So that honoring does occur in our actions. And for each individual, they're going to have actions that are easier, right? Maybe for some people, they are, they've always prioritized exercise and movement, but they're just beginning to be awakened to the role that nutrition or sleep or meditation plays in their life, right? So picking, for people on their own journey, my encouragement is to look at where your gap is, and that's where the gold is too. So, begin to step into that gap, just one step at a time.
Yeah, I love that's a great definition. I think the only difference between honor with yourself and me, it might be the "you" that we have here in Canada in that word,
Right.
spelled differently. But yeah, that's beautiful. Um, yeah, and when people when they connect deeply to that honor, and they start to really create more awareness, and I love the journaling piece as well, which creates so much self-awareness and clarity, the old fashioned writing it down and not doing everything on your phone. I think it's very powerful. I'm When you have a patient or a client that comes to you, and oftentimes we've all experienced some type of trauma in our life, and this can oftentimes be creating an unhealthy pattern with their health in a number of different ways. I mean, that's not necessarily your focus, but how do you manage that when you can clearly see somebody who is in that particular position with trauma and really, they need some deeper work in that area to really get on that path that
Yeah.
you've created?
Well, in that situation, and you're right, I do work with a lot of people. I mean, listen, we're all human beings, and we all have
Yeah,
our wounds.
yeah,
I would say wounds is another way of saying the word trauma, and so we all have them. But someone who that is really has really shaped how they care for themselves and their body, their lives. Um, there are a number of different things. One is I'm always going to call in other healthcare professionals to collaborate, right? If I see that they're going to benefit
right,
from working with a therapist, or sometimes I really see, okay, they've been working with the therapist, but there's actually some energetic processing, somatic processing that's missing from this. And so I might give them resources there. I give people what I call fulfillment exercises, also known as homework. And some of these tap into different uh, philosophies or principles, often within Buddhism, that I have found myself to be very useful in cultivating compassion and, being able to both see our actions with kindness and honesty. Typically, people choose one or the other. And when people have a big history of childhood trauma, it seems like the only option is not honesty, because otherwise they're not quite sure how to look and be kind, because they just simply put maybe they weren't really taught it, or there was something that happened that made that connect, made the coexistence of these two things very difficult to bring to life. But it is part of the journey. To me, I do. This may sound like an aside, but it's really not. When it comes to these new weight loss drugs that are out there, I have no doubt they're going to do really good things for some people. And I believe for a lot of people, a few things. One is, we don't know the long-term impact. And so we're going to learn that in time, but we don't know that right now. And I do think for some people, it's actually kind of robbing them of some healing. Because as challenging as it is to step into a new era where you're caring for yourself from self-love, to do so, there is such profound healing that occurs. And it's not always easy. It's not always, roses.
Yeah, no, I can certainly relate to that. Self-love has been my journey, and, I can say that, uh, self-care, I usually say self-care is the practice and self-love is the feeling over time. So that's been powerful for me. But something you said, about the new era just, brought up a question for me, and I find in what I'm observing in different groups and with my own practice that, there is sort of a trend back to some simplification as well, like just, the pillar, sleep, diet, and exercise, meditation. So things just like the breath, the cold, whole foods, deep, meaningful connections, time with nature, away from technology, all the things. And then you mentioned that, there is a lot of new drugs and things that are available more and more all the time as, there's a big movement in biohacking as well. So I'm just curious, in the last, couple of years, have you noticed any particular trend that you feel that you're behind in terms of what's new, or where do you sort of stand on the current climate
That's
in
a
that
good
area?
question. I would say, can I speak to a trend I'm not behind? A trend
Sure.
that
Yeah,
I'm
all of
not
it. Yeah,
behind
let's go.
is intermittent fasting. I know it's so
Oh, okay. I was going to
controversial,
ask you about that. Okay.
but the
Yeah.
reason I'm not behind, I'm not. I should say I'm not dogmatically opposed to it. Right? I'm not like nobody should enter. That's not how I am about it. I just find that for most people, it's not a sustainable solution, and for most people, it's kind of an eating disorder rebranded. So, not saying that's true for everyone, but fundamentally speaking, the way I look at it is if it's not a sustainable solution, then the outcomes aren't sustainable. And so it's not one that I'm going to reach for or encourage. So, while yes, okay, intermittent fasting may have some interesting science behind it in the way of in its benefits, for most people, it becomes an exercise, or at least most of the people who I interact with, it becomes an exercise in self aggression. It's not sustainable. It leads to rebound eating, and fundamentally, uh, just doesn't work in the long run for most people.
That's interesting. Yeah, so that's something that I've been practicing for a while. And, maybe just to ensure we're talking, so this is, I usually do like an 8-hour eating window, like, so from 12 to 8 p.m. That would be my eating window. The rest of the time I'm not eating. That
Sure.
would be your
Yeah,
definition of intermittent
absolutely.
fasting then?
And
Yeah.
like I said
Okay.
before, Brian, I'm not categorically opposed to intermittent fasting. It's just that a lot of the people who I work with, I find it's not a solution for. So, if it
Yeah.
sounds like, to me, what's the definition of working? It's producing the outcomes I care about. I feel great. I feel empowered. And part of the outcomes are my lab numbers, all those things. Then keep doing what you're doing by all means. It's just that most of the people who I work with, I find that for them, it's not sustainable. And so it's not a sustainable solution. And then I do encounter some people who, right, their stress response is so heightened that at least for this moment in time, even if they like intermittent fasting, it really isn't disordered for them. It comes from self love, it's working in that respect. Physiologically speaking, at least for the moment, it's not the right solution because it's creating a stress that layered on top of all the other stresses that are showing up in their body. It's just too many straws on the camel's back. So in that case, we might say, okay, let's abandon this for now. I know you love it. I'm not against you going back to it someday, but for this moment, let's abandon it.
Right. And maybe stay out of the cold plunge until you have something to eat then.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. What do you okay, then and on the fasting front, what is your thoughts then on a scheduled fast? So there's a subgroup in that longevity group I had mentioned who schedule fasts, I think it's
Mhm.
quarterly
Mhm.
throughout the year, 36 to 72 hours type thing, or, what are your thoughts on a fast every so often,
Yeah, I
for
think I
overall
think
health
it
and
can be
wellness?
useful, right? If it's done safely, and if the person feels empowered by it, right? Again, not an act of self aggression, and only the individual can
Mm,
say if that's true or not. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? Just because it's, something that's difficult doesn't mean that it's self aggression. Some things are just challenging, right? So all that
yeah,
considered, I've got no problem with periodic fasting. I think there's probably some utility to it.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's interesting, and yeah, just for my own perspective as well, it was hard for me simply because of the old insecurity and pattern around, I put some muscle on when I was younger just to overcome my own insecurities and for vanity and on the external, and then reducing that meal seemed to me like I was gonna fade away into nothing, but, interestingly, I actually feel a little bit better from it over time and more energy, but, uh, from a longevity perspective, I'm hearing a lot about calorie restriction as well, and I'll be 52 this year, so I'm just keeping that in mind as well, just to give you some
Awesome.
context, anybody listening. So muscle mass is interesting, and I hear a lot about that now, and again, I feel that was one practice I backed into for the wrong reasons, but fortunately at my age, I've developed some muscle mass and I understand there's a lot of benefits around that. When you work with clients maybe who haven't done resistance training and is that something you recommend as part of the protocol for sure? Like, I mean, I know you have a fitness
Yes,
background as well.
absolutely. Yeah, no, you're totally right. So at 25, I opened the first one-on-one strength training facility in Chicago, and it's still open today. So
Oh,
yeah, I was
wow.
building half
That's so
about
cool.
4 years after we opened and went to grad school. But I to this day remain a big devotee of strength training, and that type of strength training is slow strength training. I find it works really well for me and my body. But at the end of the day, strength training is of all the different, I love moving. So I can't think of any form of movement that I've met I haven't loved. Maybe downhill skiing. I don't love downhill skiing. But that's a story for a different day. But really, I love moving, right? But strength training I see is so foundational to our health for so many reasons that you already know. Right, preserving our muscle mass. Right, as we age, we are going to lose muscle. It's part of the aging process, sarcopenia. But we can halt it, and people can even reverse it, and that muscle mass plays a really important role in determining our longevity. And then we have our bone health. We also have our hormones and how they're working as it pertains to our muscle mass. So
Yeah.
so many different wonderful things we can say about muscle. Definitely, strength training is something that I guide people to bring into their life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what does your daily routine look like then? I mean, what's a day in the life of Dr. H? Do you have a particular routine? Is it fluid, or how does that roll for
It's
you every
pretty
day?
fluid. So I I I work remotely. I work remotely from Switzerland. So when I wake up here, my clients and
Oh, cool.
patients back in the US are sleeping. So my days here are a little different than when I'm back in the States. But here, I do like to start my day slowly, and I'll still start my day slowly back in the US, and get myself ready. I do some meditation, and I have my
Yeah.
breakfast, I have my tea. I usually sit down and do some deep thinking work at that time. And then I get up and I walk my husband to the train. We both love to walk. And here we have fabulous public transportation. So it's about a 15-minute walk to the train. I'll usually go for a little walk from there, or I might go to the gym, or I might go for a hike, or I might do yoga. So, something moving my body. And then I sit down and I get to work, and somewhere in there I have gotten our food for the day, and kind of prep it so that we're ready to go for dinner. And I typically, for my lunch, I more often than not have leftovers from the night before. Lots of vegetables, fabulous protein, lots of mono and polyunsaturated fats like avocado and olive oil, things like that. And often in the afternoon, I'll have a cup of ginger tea, pure ginger tea. And then before I go to bed, I do reconnect with my intention for my health and my life, and my intention for my life as a whole. And I love to read before I go to bed. Definitely do some reading, and that kind of sums up my typical work day.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds beautiful. What a nice it is. So there's a flow there as well, but you're getting checking all the boxes, let's say. Yeah, amazing. So just to wrap up, Dr. H, a lot of people who follow me or listen to this or would be curious about, the topic we have today are people who, have tried things, have failed, and then decided not to try again. Or, maybe the door of awareness is open and they realize, that what they're doing is not working, and they've had a glimpse into the 5-year future, and maybe it wasn't the outcome that they intend, or they feel that they're on a certain path or trajectory. Is there advice you give somebody to taking that first step and beginning to really take ownership and author their health
Yeah,
and
the
wellness?
my advice is to don't stick your head in the sand, right? Actually get numbers, right? Find out via your labs, and work with someone who is well trained and skilled at not just reading your labs, but explaining them to you. To me, it's really important that people understand what their labs are telling us about their health, their longevity, likeliness, their, risks, things like that. So actually get numbers, right? Test, don't guess. And then start to take new actions, right? Work with someone who can guide you, or maybe you already know some actions that would make a difference. Great. New actions produce new outcomes. And then test again, right? So we want to make sure that we are being methodical in understanding where you are and having you understand where you are, taking actions, and then assessing your progress and using that new information to inform what's next.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. So really get the information, do the blood work at the labs, and then it's
You
all
got it.
action. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. How can people find you or connect with you or learn more about
Yeah,
the work
thank
you're
you so much,
doing?
Brian. You can find me at wellempowered.com. And what you'll find is a place where you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation. You can also register to get on a wait list for an upcoming course if that's something you're interested in as well. And if you're on social media, you can find me at Well Empowered. I will also say, if you do schedule a consultation and you decide that working together feels like a good fit, please make sure you let me know where you heard about Well Empowered and me, because from Brian, you will get a 10% discount.
All right. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge you for the work you're doing. I think it's fantastic. I love the approach and the heart led piece as well. I think is so important. You really care and are very passionate about it. So
Thank
thank you
you
so
so much,
much.
Brian. It is a pleasure connecting.